L'chaim, everybody.
I got strawberry flavor.
Before
I got free flavor.
before Shimshon HaGibor, the mighty Shimshon was born, an angel appeared to his mother, father, and gave them special instructions. Shimshon would have to be a Nazir of Hashem, right? Before he was born, from the womb, and his parents had to get special instructions in order to know that they were going to have a special son, and there were things they had to do to prepare. We find other people in history who were notified before they had a child. We know that Moshe's father, Amram, had a prophecy from his daughter Miriam, who told him that he would have this very special child. And of course, there's something that he had to receive this prophecy because he had to know. He had to know how to conduct himself. He was actually, at that point, many Jews didn't want to get married because all of the baby boys are being thrown into the river. And Amram, Moshe's father, went ahead and divorced his wife because of this. So he received a special instruction from Hashem through his daughter Miriam, who had a prophecy that he would have a son, a very special son, and that caused him to get remarried. However, in general, Hashem does not tell people before they're going to have a child that they're going to have it doesn't notify people that they're going to have children and exactly when they're going to have children. Unless there's a reason for it. So it seems a little strange that in this week's Torah portion, Hashem sends 3 angels to Avram and Sarah for the purpose of notifying Sarah that she is going to have a child in 1 year. Right? What's the point? Why does she need to know a year in advance that she's going to have a child in a year? Right? Furthermore, Hashem already told Avram and Sarah many times that they would have children. He promised them this. And Hashem actually appeared to Avram himself 3 days earlier and told him that he's going to have a son. So why did Hashem have to send a special message to Sarah that you're going to have a child in a year? Right? Would there have been a problem? Would it have been a problem if she would have found out a few months later when she would have realized that she's pregnant? Right? Why did she have to know in advance? What? Well, we're asking if you want to provide some input.
Maybe she was very depressed over Hagar being pregnant.
Okay, well, Hashem could have done that 14 years earlier. If that was this was 14 years later, right? That was 13 years later. Yisuk would be born, right? So if that was the purpose, Hashem should have came many years earlier and told her that. Yes.
Maybe because he wanted to show her that it's above nature.
Okay, but she would have realized that when it happened, right? She was 90 years old. She would have realized that she had a child. You're saying she should know that she's gonna have a miracle. Okay, but why did she have to know that now and not in 6 months' time? She would have realized it anyways in a few more months.
Because
right? She would have realized it at some point. Well, don't worry, we're going to get to the answer. In this Baruch was a chassid who lived in the city of Karlin 250 years ago, and during that time, it was the middle of the winter, and it got dark very early. And at that point, the government had issued a curfew forbidding people to go around at night. It was a war going on, and they were afraid of people going around outside sending messages. And they passed the law that everybody needs to stay in their homes at night. Now, for most people, it's not a big deal. Stay in your house at night once it gets dark. Right? For the Jewish community, it was a bit, what?
I wish I could tell that to my boss.
For the Jews, it was a little hard because you had to schedule a Meyer a little bit earlier before it got dark. But for Baruch, it was a big problem. See, Baruch worked all day. And at night, he used to go he used to try every day. He used to spend time with his Rebbe, Aaron of Karlin. But now he has to stay home at night. He works all day. and he has no time to spend with his Rebbe, right? Shabbos is one thing, but the whole week. So one night, after he comes home from work, he's sitting at home, and he feels a longing to go see his Rebbe. So he decides, who cares what the government says? He's going to go out, and he's going to spend some time with his Rebbe. So he takes, he goes outside, and he's heading towards his Rebbe's house, when suddenly he's stopped by two police officers. You're under arrest for breaking the curfew. They throw some chains on him, and they throw him into prison. Okay, he's sitting in prison, and he says, listen, at least I was thrown in prison for a good reason. I was going to see my Rebbe. Unfortunately, Hashem obviously did not give me the opportunity to spend time with my Rebbe, but he always carried with him a Tehillim. He said, at least I have a Sefer Tehillim with me. I could use out the time and learn a little bit and read some Tehillim. So he opens up the Tehillim, and he starts reading with a big fervor and an enthusiasm. And the guard at the entrance of the cell is a bit annoyed by this prisoner who's reading Tehillim. So he opens up the door, he grabs his Tehillim out of his hand, and he slams the door shut. Baruch doesn't know what to do, right? He wanted to go to the Rebbe. He's not able to go to the Rebbe. He wanted to at least say some Tehillim, and they take away Tehillim. He says, I'm not going to let this upset me. He says, I'm still a Jew, and I need to be happy that I'm a Jew who is created to serve Hashem. So if I don't have the mitzvah of saying Tehillim, I don't have the mitzvah of spending time with my Rebbe, I don't have any books to learn Torah, I can do the mitzvah of rejoicing in the fact that I'm a Jew. So he gets up in the cell and he starts singing and dancing, right? The guard is sitting in front of the cell. He says, listen, the cell is not an insane asylum. Get out of here. We don't want people like you in here, right? And of course, what did he do as soon as he got out? He went to see his Rebbe, right? And he tells the Rebbe, listen, Rebbe, they tried to stop me, but with my joy, I overcame all the obstacles. With my joy, I overcame all the obstacles. And we're taught by Hashem Tov taught this, that a person who is happy when they do a mitzvah, that joy will overcome any obstacles that try to stop him from doing the mitzvah. And even if he has a good reason to be upset, he has a good reason to be sad, nevertheless, if he chooses to be happy, all of the reasons that he has to be upset will disappear. My great uncle. What?
But he also has a reason to be happy.
Yeah, of course, we all have a reason to be happy. Hashem created us. Hashem gave us the Torah and mitzvahs, right? My great uncle, Rab Vayeira of Premishlan, the great tzaddik Rab Vayeira of Premishlan. So one year, shortly before Rosh Hashanah, his daughter became severely ill. And of course, the doctors came, they tried to give her medicine, but it didn't really seem to be working. And her situation deteriorated. Rosh Hashanah passed, Yom Kippur passed, and her condition got worse. And before Sukkot, the doctor said she doesn't have much time left. But Sukkot is a time when he's supposed to be happy, right? It's Zman Simchaseinu. And our mayor decided that even though, he has every reason to be upset, he has a mitzvah to be happy. And that Sukkot he decided to celebrate with extra joy. The whole Sukkot, 7 days of Sukkot, he was really happy, even more than usual. And finally, Simchas Torah came around. And now you have a mitzvah not just to be happy, you have a mitzvah to sing and dance. And he of course, he had every reason not to dance that year, but he decided that this is the mitzvah. He's not going to let anything get him down, and he takes the Torah and he's singing and dancing in shul for many hours late into the night. Late at night, when he's in the middle of dancing, someone comes running in and says, the doctors say it's time. If you want to say goodbye to your daughter, Chas v'shalom, want to see her before she leaves this world. So Rav Meir rushes to the house, and he sees that, it seems like it's his daughter's last moments in this world. And he turns to Hashem, and he says, listen, Hashem, you gave us a mitzvah to be happy on Sukkot. You gave us a mitzvah to rejoice with the Torah, to sing and dance with the Torah. And even though it was hard for me, I did my best. But I have a problem now, Hashem. What's my problem? The problem is like this. The Gemara says that a person needs to rejoice when he hears bad news, when something bad happens to him, just like he's happy when something good happens to him, right? So if chas v'shalom, if chas v'shalom a person suffers a loss, he has to be happy. He has to rejoice. He has to be happy with this thing that happened to him, even though it's a bad thing, even though it seems bad. However, I also have a mitzvah to be happy on Simchas Torah because it's Yom Tov and I need to rejoice with the Torah. And the Gemara tells us that Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. You're not allowed to mix two joys together. That's the reason why you're not allowed to get married on Yom Tov or during Chol Hamoed. The person's not allowed to make a wedding on Yom Tov because of the mitzvah to rejoice in Yom Tov. And we don't want to distract from the joy of Yom Tov with the joy of the wedding. So he says, Hashem, I have a great mitzvah now to rejoice in Simchas Torah. And now you want to take away my daughter, and I'm going to be so happy over the loss of my daughter, I'm going to be distracted from the joy of Yom Tov. Hashem, you cannot do that.
You mean upset?
No, there's a mitzvah to be happy when a person suffers a loss. Right? The Gemara says that a person who hears bad news has a mitzvah to rejoice as if he heard good news. Right? So I'm going to have a mitzvah to be happy if my daughter passes away. And that's going to distract from my joy of Yom Tov. It's a mitzvah to be happy when you hear bad news. Yes? Right? You have to accept it with joy. Right? You have now. The Alter Rebbe says you have to have happiness and sadness at the same time. You shouldn't only be happy; you have to also be upset. Right? So Hashem, you can't. This is not a good time. You have to wait till after Yom Tov. He says, because if you do it now, I'm not going to be able to celebrate the two joys at the same time. And as he finishes the prayer, suddenly his daughter begins to sweat. And the doctor said that there was a slight improvement, and slowly her situation got better. So Rav Meir used his joy as an argument to Hashem, that Hashem should take away any reason he has not to be happy. Any reason he has not to be happy. And we're told that joy, even if there's a decree against the person in heaven, the fact that a person's happy can nullify that decree. The Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, was known for, he had a group of Hasidim who were known as the Mittler Rebbe's Kapelje, which means the Mittler Rebbe's choir. And it wasn't just a choir, it was a group of Hasidim who would entertain and bring joy at anytime there was a joyous event, whenever they had a Farbrengen, whenever there was some special day, he would bring out this group of Hasidim, they would sing, they would play music, and they actually had a group of Hasidim who would perform. They were a group of acrobats. They would perform different feats on horseback to entertain the crowd and to make everybody happy. Right? That's what he would do. Right? They wouldn't just hire, some acrobats, some jugglers to come in. They would have a group of Hasidim who trained. This was part of their thing. They would entertain the crowd and make people happy. And the Mittler would call them whenever there was a joyous occasion. One time, it was the middle of the week, just an ordinary day, and the Mittler says he wants his kapelya to come and perform. People are a little surprised. It's not a Yom Tov coming. There's no Yom Tov coming up. There's no special day. But if the Rebbe asks them to perform, they begin performing. And of course, they begin singing, playing music, and then the acrobats come out on horseback and they start their performance. And one of the acrobats was the Mittler Rebbe's son, Rav Nachum. And as they're performing, suddenly his horse rears up, and he's thrown off the horse. Lands on the ground, his leg breaks, and he's severely injured. Right? Of course, immediately, all the performers stop. Everybody stops singing. The music stops. And the Mittler Rebbe motions, why do you stop? Continue. And somebody rushes over and he says, Rebbe, your son just fell off. Maybe the Rebbe didn't notice. Your son just fell off the horse. And the Rebbe says, continue the singing, the dancing. And as difficult as it was, they continued singing and dancing. Somebody, of course, ran over, picked up Rav Nachum. They brought him into the house. They called for a doctor. But the Rebbe stayed there, and he insisted that they finish the performance. They complete the entire performance, the entire entertainment, and only afterwards did he go to see his son. And at that point, the doctor had come, and the doctor said, "It's not very serious. It's a minor, he has a broken leg, but it should, we'll put on a bandage, a cast, and it should heal within a short time." So one of the Hasidim who's there turns to the Rebbe and he says, "Rebbe, I don't understand. Why did you tell the entertainers to continue singing and dancing when your son was injured?" So the Rebbe says, "Is that your only question? You should have a better question. You should ask, why did I call the entertainers in the first place? It's not Yom Tov. Why did I call the entertainers today?" He said, "Yeah, it's a good point, Rebbe. Why did you call the entertainers today?" So the Rebbe says, "Because I saw in heaven that there was a decree against my son. My son was supposed to be severely injured today, right? Something terrible was supposed to happen to him. And of course, I prayed to annul the decree, but I saw that the only way to really annul the decree was through joy and happiness. If everybody would rejoice together, the power of joy would annul the decree. And that's why I called entertainers, and we're able to weaken the decree, so that instead of something terrible happening to him, he only broke a leg. But then I insisted that they continue entertaining, so that even that broken leg should only be temporary, and it'll soon be healed." I didn't say what was supposed to happen, but obviously it was something a lot worse than breaking a leg. So we see that even if there's a decree in heaven against the person and something bad is supposed to happen to you, when a person decides to be happy and rejoice, he can hold off anything bad that was supposed to happen to him. Now, of course, a Rebbe is able to see when there's a decree in heaven, so he knows when to rejoice. But what about all of us? We don't know when there's a decree in heaven against us, right? There might be a decree, chas v'shalom, today against us. So what do? We have to always be happy, right? We have to always be happy. We have to always celebrate. We have to always say l'chaim together. We have to always rejoice.
Even better, it's
and we have to realize that when a person chooses to be happy and celebrate the fact that he's a Jew and that he's a servant of Hashem, that itself is enough to bring down blessings into his life. L'chaim. And it's not only blessings, but it actually brings down holiness into his life. The Rambam, in Hilchas Yesodei HaTorah, Perek Zayin, speaks about prophecy, about one of the fundamental beliefs that Hashem reveals himself to people, and there are prophets in this world, and the Rambam gives instructions, tells us how a person can become a prophet, how a person can merit a divine revelation from Hashem. And the Rambam writes that even a person who went through all the preparation and all the steps that he needs to reach the level of prophecy, he cannot receive prophecy whenever he wants. Instead, he has to prepare himself. Of course, he has to concentrate his attention and seclude himself, and then he has to put himself in a joyous mood. And the Rambam says that the prophets, when they wanted to receive prophecy, they would carry with them all the time musical instruments. So whenever they wanted to receive prophecy, they would be able to play music.
Not Elisha, nothing.
So the Rambam says about the Bnei Anavim who are learning to become prophets. Well, I guess once they reach a certain level, they're able to be happy without the music. But the people who are striving for prophecy, yes, that's true. But it doesn't say you have to carry musical instruments with them. But people who are striving to become prophets would carry around musical instruments with them, and they would play. Magicians. They would have music to make themselves happy, so that they could merit a divine revelation. In the Zohar, at the end of Parshas Truma, there's a section in Zohar called Safra D'Tzniusa, which means the Book of Secrets. The Book of Secrets. And of course, in general, it's quite difficult to learn the Zohar. I don't know if anybody here tried to learn Zohar. It's very cryptic and hard to understand. But as difficult as the entire Zohar is, this section of Safra D'Tzniusa, the Book of Secrets, is even more difficult to understand. Right? The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, says that this section is actually the source of the entire Zohar, just like the Mishnah is the source of the Talmud. This section is the source of the entire Zohar. It's divided into 5 parts, which correspond to the 5 books of the Torah. And the Arizal wrote a commentary on this section of the Zohar, and later the Vilna Gaon also wrote a commentary on this section of the Zohar. And the Vilna Gaon student, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, wrote an introduction to the Gra's commentary on the Safra D'Tzniusa. And in his introduction, he sets out to explain to us why the Vilna Gaon is qualified to write a commentary on this deep, hidden section of the Zohar, the deep secrets of the Torah. And he tells us, he writes many details, he writes many stories about the Vilna Gaon, and he says that he knows that the Vilna Gaon had would very often have dreams where he would have divine revelations at night, in dreams. And he says that he doesn't know if the Vilna Gaon would have revelations while he was awake. He doesn't know much about that, but he knows one story that he can tell us. The story goes like this. One day, in the city of Vilna, a stranger shows up. A Jew, a stranger shows up in town, and he declares that he is a prophet, that he has prophetic dreams, and that secrets are revealed to him in dreams. Now, originally people didn't really believe him, but they pretty quickly realized that that he knew everything that was going on. He knew all the secrets of everybody in town. He knew everybody's secrets. He knew everything about you. You'd approach him, and he could tell you anything that ever happened to you. Right? He knew everything about everybody in town, things that there's no way he could have known. And you might think that people would hear there's a holy prophet amongst them. They would want to get to know him. But the exact opposite happened. Everybody started avoiding him, right? If you have somebody who knows everything that happened to you throughout your life, you don't want to get close to this guy, right? And people were actually scared to meet him. He would meet somebody in the street and say, hey, what happened last night? I know where you were last night. Why did you do whatever you did, right? And people started to avoid him. He would come to shul. Everybody would go to a different shul. Some of the prominent people in the town realized that he's causing problems. So one of the richest people in Vilna went over to this guy and said, you're causing too many problems. You got to leave our town. And he says, you telling me to leave the town? I know exactly what you did last month. Does your partner know how much money you stole from the business? And the guy runs off. The guy here runs away. Another guy comes over and he says, it wasn't right. You shouldn't have embarrassed him like that. And he says, you're telling me about where were you 2 nights ago? I know exactly who you met 2 nights ago and what you did together. Right? So it's causing a lot of problems. So the community leaders, the board of Vilna got together. They had a big meeting. What do they do about this new prophet who's in their city? Right? Everybody's afraid of him, right? Everyone's afraid to get close to him, so they decide they have to get rid of him. They're going to hire a group of...
but they need to know if they're going to have a baby or not.
Huh?
But what if they want to know if they're trying to get rid of a baby?
Well, he didn't... I don't think... It doesn't say he predicted the future. It says that he knew... He spoke about things that were hidden. It doesn't say he predicted the future. At least that... Chaim doesn't say he predicted the future, but he knew everything that was going on. So they decided they're gonna hire a group of strong people, strong men, to grab him and throw him out of the town and give him a warning never to come back. But one of the leaders of the community said, it's not right. How can we do this to a holy person, a prophet of Hashem, to hire a group of hitmen to throw him out of town? It's not respectful. It might, we might get punished for it. He's a holy person. We can't treat him like this. So they decided to go to the Vilna Gaon and ask him what to do about this guy. Right? So they went over to the Vilna Gaon and they told him exactly what was going on. There's this new prophet here and everybody's scared of him. And what should we do? We want to send him, we want to tell him to leave, but we're a little afraid. He's a holy guy. So the Vilna Gaon says, I would like to meet him. Okay, sure. So they go over to this prophet and they tell him the Vilna Gaon wants to see you. So he comes to the shul where the Vilna Gaon is learning. And the Vilna Gaon says, I hear that you're a prophet. Maybe you could tell me something. So he says, of course. He says, he thinks for a minute, and the Vilna Gaon is looking at him the entire time. And he says, 2 weeks ago, on Thursday, you were sitting in this room and you were learning Parshas Hazinu. Listen to this verse in Parshas Hazinu, and you were mechadish. You came up with a novel idea. You came up with a chiddush in the pasuk. And I see that while you were learning, I see there Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was sitting on your right side, and the Arizal was sitting on your left side. So the Vilna Gaon looks at him, and he turns to the people who brought him, to the community leaders. He says, what he says is true, but I am issuing a decree that he needs to leave the town and never come back.
Why?
So they turn to the Vilna Gaon. And so of course, this guy leaves. The Vilna Gaon told him to leave. He left. So they say to the Vilna Gaon, why? If he's saying the truth, why did you decree that he needs to leave town? So he says, because it was clear that his powers weren't powers of holiness. They were powers of impurity. They were from the Sitra Achra. How did you know? How do you know it's from the Sitra Achra? Maybe it's powers of holiness. So he says, I was watching his face while he was saying his prophecy. There was not a trace of a smile on his face. As a matter of fact, I looked into his eyes and I saw depression and anger at the moment that he was saying this prophecy. And such a prophecy cannot be from a source of holiness. A prophet, true holiness, true prophecy, comes through simcha, comes through joy. And this explains the Sforno, is why Hashem sent the angel to Sarah, to notify her that she's going to have a child. They were about to have Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak, of course, all of our patriarchs were holy, were pure, but Yitzchak was known as a oila tmimas, a complete sacrifice for Hashem. He was so holy and so pure that he was not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. And his purity, his sacrifice, he was brought as a sacrifice to Hashem. He was an oili. He was considered as if he was actually sacrificed on the altar for Hashem. And his sacrifice protected. 37? 37. Yes. 130. Yeah. 137. Right? So Yitzchak was called a oila tmima. He was completely pure and completely holy, even more than Avraham and Yaakov. Now, in order to have such a holy child, says the Sforno, the parents have to be, of course, in order for him to live a life of holiness, the only way for him to live a holy life is for him to constantly be happy and rejoice. And that's why he was given the name Yitzchak. The word Yitzchak means laughter and happiness. And it was not enough, says this Sforno, that Yitzchak himself throughout his life should be happy. But from before he was born, from the moment he was conceived, throughout the months of pregnancy, his parents had to be in a state of complete and utter joy. Now, of course, Avraham and Sarah were always happy. They always rejoiced. They were servants of Hashem. But their happiness was incomplete. They were 100 years old and 90 years old, and they had not had children yet. And even though they did everything they could to be happy, but there was something missing in their happiness. And if their happiness was incomplete, says this Sforno, they could not have such a holy child. And therefore Hashem appeared to Avram a year before Yitzchak is born, and he told him, you are going to have a son. So that Avram's happiness should be complete. And then he sent a second message. He sent 3 angels to go to Sarah and to make sure that Sarah, before she conceives and throughout the entire pregnancy, should be in a state of complete happiness. That's the only way they would be able to have such a holy child. And to conclude with a final story, the Baal Shem Tov.
The reason that they told that the Malach told them?
Yes, the angels told. First Hashem told Avram, and then 3 angels told Sarah.
They wanted her to be happy.
They wanted her happiness to be complete. They wanted her to be on a higher level of happiness for the next year, when she would know that she would have a son next year. She would be in such a state of happiness that she'd be able to draw down such a holy soul into her. The Baal Shem Tov was once sitting Friday night with his Hasidim, and they were eating the Shabbos meal together, when suddenly the Baal Shem Tov began to laugh in the middle of the meal. A big smile appeared on his face. He started to laugh, even got up, he danced a little bit. And the Hasidim were a little surprised. This was a bit unusual, but the Baal Shem Tov didn't say anything, so they continued their meal. 10 minutes passed by, 15 minutes passed by, and again, suddenly the Baal Shem Tov breaks into a big smile. He stands up and he starts singing and dancing. Another 15 minutes go by, and again he starts to sing and dance. And the Chassidim were curious. They waited. Maybe the Baal Shem Tov will tell them, but he didn't say anything. The whole Shabbos passed by. Finally, Shabbos is over, and they sit down to Malava Malka, and the students say to the Baal Shem Tov, you got to tell us what this was all about. What happened over here? So the Baal Shem Tov said, I won't just tell you what happened. We'll hear it firsthand. We'll hear the story firsthand. Get into the wagon, and we're going to go on a trip. Right? They get into the wagon. The horses begin to fly through the air, and within a short time, they found themselves in the city of Akta. The horses pull up. The Baal Shem Tov asks, they pull up in front of the house of Shapsai the bookbinder. He was retired. He used to be a bookbinder. He was now a bit older, and they knock on the door, and Shapsai opens the door, and he sees this rabbi, a whole group of rabbis, and all of his Hasidim there, and he's a little nervous. What do you want? And the Baal Shem Tov comes in, and he says, Shapsai, I want you to tell us what happened last night. What happened last night during your Shabbos meal? And Shapsai says, okay, I'll tell you. I hope everything was okay. If I did something wrong, I'm really sorry. I'm a simple Jew. I don't really, I don't learn a lot of Torah. If I made a mistake, it's, I didn't realize it. And the Baal Shem says, no, we want to hear what happened. And Shapsai says, he begins telling the Baal Shem Tov how he's getting older. A year ago, he retired from his job as a bookbinder. And Parnasa has been very difficult for him. It's been very difficult for him. He doesn't have any money. He works a little bit, but he doesn't have energy to he's already older. He doesn't have energy to work a lot. There are some of his competition are better, younger bookbinders. They get all the good jobs in town. And he doesn't make a lot of money, but he tries to save up a few pennies every week for Shabbos that he should be able to have to honor Shabbos with candles, with some wine, with challah. But this week, it was Friday, and they didn't have a penny in the house. They didn't have a penny in the house. And of course, he knows that in town there's a tzedakah fund for people who cannot afford, who need help with the expenses for Shabbos. But he knows that we're taught, our Chachamim teach us that it's better for a person to have a simple Shabbos and not rely on others. So he spoke to his wife. He said, listen, it's very difficult. This is going to be our first Shabbos where we don't really have any candles. We don't have any wine. But we're not going to ask anybody for help, and we're going to try to be happy on Shabbos even though we don't have anything. Okay? And Friday morning, Shapsai tells his wife Shabbos afternoon, a few hours before Shabbos, he tells his wife he's going to shul to learn a little bit in preparation for Shabbos, and he's a little nervous. He thought maybe his wife, who's not used to such a Shabbos, she might ask some of the neighbors for help. So he tells her, please, I ask you, we're going to have a simple Shabbos. Don't ask anybody for help. I don't want to take any tzedakah from anybody. We'll be happy with a simple Shabbos as long as we don't, as long as we only rely on Hashem, we don't rely on other people for help. Okay? He goes off to shul. He spends a few hours learning. Shabbos comes in. He davens in shul, and he comes home after davening, and he's surprised as he's approaching his house. He sees the whole house is lit up. Right? And he's a little nervous. How did his wife get candles? He walks into the front door, and he's shocked. The table is set. There's wine, there's challah, there's fish, there's salads all around the table. And he thinks to himself, this is a big problem. My wife must have, she wasn't able to resist, and she must have asked people for help. She must have gone to the tzedakah fund and asked for some help. Okay, he doesn't want to say anything. He's, that's what his wife decided to do. He's not gonna get upset over it. It's Shabbos, so he sits down. He makes kiddush, and they wash, and finally, as they start eating the fish, he turns to his wife, and he can't contain himself anymore, and he says, what happened? Where did all the food come from? And his wife says, listen, I'll tell you. she says, I had no food to prepare for Shabbos, right? I had nothing, the house was empty. So I decided, at least in honor of Shabbos, I'll make the house extra clean. I'm going to go around the entire house, cleaning it like we never cleaned it before. The house should be extra clean and spotless for Shabbos. And as I'm going around cleaning, I suddenly noticed in the back of one of the closets an old glove that we hadn't used in years. And this was a glove from the good old days when we used to have money. And it had on the glove, there was a silver button. And I was so excited, I immediately cut off the silver button, and I ran to the pawn shop, and I pawned the button, I got some money, and I was able to go out and buy food for Shabbos. And Shabbos is so happy, so relieved. Right? They didn't have to ask anybody else for help, and Hashem managed to send them at the last minute such a beautiful Shabbos. He jumps up from his seat, and he grabs his wife's hands, and they start dancing around the table. They start singing and dancing around the table. They're so excited. After they finish their dance, they sit down and they eat their fish. After they finish their fish, the wife comes out, and she brings out a delicious soup for Shabbos. And again, Shabbos is so happy. They have such a delicious soup. They haven't had such a good soup in years. He again jumps up from the table. He grabs his wife's hands and they start to dance, sing and dance around the table. They finish their soup and she goes into the kitchen. She brings out the chicken. And again, Shabbos jumps up from his seat. He's so happy. He's so excited. They have an opportunity to celebrate Shabbos in such a beautiful manner. Right? And Hashem gave them this gift to allow them to celebrate Shabbos so beautifully. Again, he jumps up and him and his wife sing and dance around the table. And Shabbos finishes his story and he says, that's what our meal was like last night. If we did something wrong, tell me. Hashem says, no, just the opposite. You did nothing wrong. I was in Mezhebush, she said. But I suddenly felt that all the heavens were illuminated. I went up and I saw all the angels in heaven were singing and dancing. There was a tremendous revelation in heaven. When you began to sing and dance, all of the angels in heaven began to sing and dance as well. And he turns to Shabbos and he says, you don't know what your joy accomplished. Your joy brought down such holiness and such blessing into the world. In Mezhebush, I celebrated with you. And because of this great joy and this great blessing that you brought down and the great holiness that you brought down into this world, it's been decreed that you should receive a special reward. How would you like to be rewarded? And Shapsai says, listen, we're already older. We don't have a lot of money, but we're happy with what we have. We don't need any money. We're happy with the way things are. But unfortunately, me and my wife do not have any children, and we're already older. And according to the doctors, it doesn't look like we could have any children. But if you're offering me a blessing, I would like to have a son. And the Baal Shem Tov said, of course, in this honor, in the merit of the great joy that you had, the Simcha Shel Mitzvah, not only are you going to have a son, but you're going to have a son who's going to grow up to be a big tzaddik. And a year later, indeed, his wife had a son. They called him Yisrael, after the Baal Shem Tov, who told him the news that they're going to have a son. And this son grew up to be the great Kozhnitzer Maggid, of Yisrael, the Maggid of Kozhnitz. So this is what our Parsha is telling us. Our Parsha is telling us, when Yitzchak is born, Sarah says, Hashem made me laugh. He made me rejoice. Sarah is telling us the secret of having such a special son. Sarah is saying, do you want to know how I merited to have first of all, how I merited to have a child at this age, how I merited this great miracle. And furthermore, how I merited to have a son who's going to grow up and be such a great tzaddik. It's because of the joy, because Hashem allowed me to, Hashem notified me in advance and allowed me to have a complete simcha throughout this year and draw down this holy neshama. And Sarah continues, anybody who hears about it should also laugh. Why is Sarah saying this? Sarah is saying, because if you also want to have a son like Yitzchak, if you also want to bring blessings into your life, if you also are in a situation where you think that you can bring some extra holiness, some extra blessing into your life, you should also realize that Simcha Shel Mitzvah, brings down blessings and holiness into all of our lives.